Welcome back, and in today's video we're tackling another set of abilities in Heroclix, helping you learn the game as quickly and easily, most importantly, as possible. We've already done speed, we've already done attack, so I'll flash these up here somewhere, so if you want to go check them out, go check them out. In this one we're looking at defense, and then the next one's going to be damage obviously, and finally we'll finish with a big game just to go through it all, show you it all in action, and just help you tidy up some of those rules you're a little unsure of. Let's get down to the table and get into this one. To kick us off, a nice easy one, we've got super senses. So whether it's a range attack or a close attack, let's do a close attack in this example. John Constantine is going to attack the question. Two of my favorite characters, so I thought we'd go with them. We'll roll, not the best roll, probably should save time rolling here and just let's set it up. So there's an 11. 9 attack with Constantine, that's 20, so it does hit the question. Now in this scenario, the question has super senses. Now super senses reads, when this character would be hit, roll a d6. On a 5 to 6, they evade the attack. So a few things to note there, which is quite important, is when it would be hit. So if you do roll a 5 or 6, the character is technically not hit as they evade it. So in this case, let's say he rolls the 5-6. The attack would be evaded, so no damage would be dealt. If Constantine had anything that worked with hits, so a special that said when they hit, this wouldn't work because they have technically not been hit, they've evaded, they've jumped out of the way. It's a power you see on nimble characters like Spider-Man quite often. It can be just such a devastating roll, 5-6, and you just get out of the way of the damage entirely. There's a few things that work with it. Sometimes you'll have super senses for 4 to 6, which is very powerful. You'll have Wonder Woman team ability, which works with it and increases it. You'll have stuff like Precision Strike, which makes it more difficult. So let's say John had Precision Strike in this case, question would only succeed on the super senses on a 6 in that case, because it reduces it by 1. If he had the 4 to 6 special, it would reduce it by 1, so it'd be 5 to 6. So it just makes it more difficult for the defending character. Next up, again, a very easy one, we've got Toughness. So in this scenario, again, John hits the question here. We are gonna deal, let's not make it more complicated than it needs to be. We're gonna deal 2 damage to the question. However, in this scenario, the question has Toughness. So instead of taking the full 2 damage, they're gonna reduce it by 1, just take 1 click. Very simple, just reduce the damage by 1. There are things that go through it, so stuff like Exploit Weakness, Penetrating Psychic Blast is going to just ignore that toughness and go straight through, deal the full 2 damage. But otherwise, you get to reduce some damage, it's always nice. It helps deal with stuff like Poison, which isn't penetrating, but it just does 1 damage to everything around you. So Toughness would stop stuff like Poison, like 1 damage. Reduces anything above that. So it is a very nice power, one that you find on those lower point characters normally, and as they get more powerful, you start to see stuff like Invulnerability, Impervious, Invincible, all of things which we'll get to in this video. Right, for this one, I'm gonna need an extra character, so let's add yet another of my favorite characters, Wolverine. Wolverine is sided with Question in this one, and Constantine would like to try and attack the question. Now in this scenario, let's say Wolverine has defend, and let's say he has a printed 19 defense. That means when Constantine tries to attack the question, because the question is adjacent, they're gonna take Wolverine's printed defense value. So even though we've only got 17 defense on the question, because of the defend on Wolverine, question is gonna go up to the same printed defense, which in this case, let's say is 19. So now the question has 19 and makes him slightly harder to hit. Now a few things to note, it is printed defense, so if Wolverine has defend with 19, let's say the question has perplex, and the question perplex up Wolverine's defense. Let's say it's like this, because we can make it into a scenario. So he's got perplex, decides to perplex up Wolverine's defense. It doesn't affect the defend. Defend says printed defense value, so it's gonna be 19 given to question. So in this case, with his perplex, because he's gonna get attacked by Constantine most likely, it would be better to take the 19 from defend from Wolverine and then perplex himself. The way things like that work, it's always replace and modify. So you replace with Wolverine's 19 and then modify with your perplex. So you could be up to a 20 defense. It's very small things like that that might come up, and it's always good to learn. Let's get Wolverine away from this one. Next up, we've got combat reflexes. So question actually has it. It's the light green defense power, and it just gives you a +2 up close. So if in this scenario, Constantine wanted to try and punch the question, with 9 attack, against a 17, he would need an 8, but we have combat reflexes, so he's actually gonna need a 10. So Constantine's gonna take a big swing, and he has missed. Modifying defense is very powerful. Just having higher numbers and making it more difficult. For example, if let's say Constantine's got some range, we could throw the question into Constantine and tie him up, making it more difficult. So they either have to break away, risk breakaway anyway, because they might not get it, or they have to swing on that massive 19 defense with the combat reflexes. The other version of that is energy shield deflection. So in this scenario, let's say Constantine wanted to attack Question and Questioning had energy shield deflection. Because it's at range, he gets a +2, so it's exactly the same as combat reflexes, but at range. So in this scenario, maybe we've got running shot with energy shield, so we would want to try and break away, shoot Constantine, and then he would have to shoot us back instead of, again, attacking up close. It's just sort of knowing which of those you have and playing your team around it can be quite effective. Having higher numbers, making the dice more difficult, is one of the more important things in Heroclix. Now this next one's a little wordy, so I'm going to read it exactly as it reads. So it reads: power, minimum range 4. Generate up to 4 blocking terrain markers, one at a time, in distinct squares within range. Other than the first, each marker must be adjacent to at least one other, and at least one must be within line of fire. At the beginning of your next turn, even if this is lost, remove them. So very similar to what we talked about in the last episode with Smoke Cloud. In this one, we don't get quite as many tokens, so just grab these quickly. Right, so let's set it up like this. We're going to give barrier to Question in this scenario. Obviously, you can see some blocking here, but it's not quite protecting his team. So Question is going to decide to use barrier. The first one has to be within range. You get a minimum range of 4, so we could potentially go up to here. They have to be next to each other, but you only have to have line of fire to the first one. So if we put one here, we could continue around here if we wanted to. It's all within 4 squares. They're all next to each other, and we have line of fire to the first one placed. So that would be a legal use of barrier. For example, if we went like, let's say you wanted to do that. Now, that's not legal for a few reasons. First off, we can't actually see the first barrier placed. Second off, this one is adjacent to none of them. So that would be illegal for a few reasons. Just showing you a few ways that it shouldn't work so you can avoid it. In this scenario, I think our best shot is barrier in here though. So it's a very defensive ability in general. So in this case, because we've got the block in here already, if we put block in here, there's actually no way for Constantine to get to us, and he would have to go all the way around or potentially wait a turn for our barrier to go before he can even attack. So it's quite a good power to sort of block characters to try and defend yours and make it more difficult for your opponent. Now, this next one we're going to need another character for again, and it is a very wordy one, a very complicated power. So let's go through it. Let's say Constantine is going to try and shoot the Question, but the Question has Mastermind. We're going to put Wolverine on the Question's team for this one, and again, I'm going to read it exactly how it reads first. So when this character will be hit by an opponent's attack that deals damage, you may choose an adjacent friendly character that wouldn't be hit by this attack and that is less points or shares a keyword. That friendly character instead becomes a hit target of the attack, even if it's already a target or would be an illegal target. So in this case, this Wolverine actually, so it's less points, so that's perfect. Otherwise, if it was more points, we would need to show a keyword. So there's a few different ways to work it. You can't just Mastermind to anyone. So let's say Constantine has hit the Question. The Question's going to take 2 damage. And let's say he's only got one click left. He doesn't want to die. He's got Mastermind. So instead of taking the damage himself, he's going to Mastermind it to Wolverine. So Wolverine becomes hit instead. Wolverine actually has Toughness, so he's only going to take 1 of those. So it's quite nice to put on stuff with like Invincible and reduce the damage. It's quite nice just to, like in this scenario, if you're going to be knocked out, or let's say you've got a really strong top click with Mastermind and you don't want to be knocked off it. Again, put it onto one of the lackeys. If you have something like a Pog, so some characters you can just summon as Pogs. Let me grab an example here. So like this Thorn Vine, let's say this is in play. We could decide to Mastermind to this. So we're not giving up any points. We're not actually taking any damage on our team, but that deals with that attack. Instead of the Question taking it, we're putting it on a much smaller and less relevant character. So you do need to find ways around Mastermind because it can be quite powerful. Obviously Outwit being the main one. Like in that example there, if you've got Outwit, you need to be using it on Mastermind, else they're going to get rid of this Pog, and you really gain nothing for that attack. Pulse Wave is another good one. So not only could, let's say we were going to Pulse Wave from here, Not only would we hit the question, we could hit Wolverine. They don't get their powers, so you can't use Mastermind. So there's a few cool variations to do with it just to get around it. In general, it can be a very powerful ability and one I think is massively underused in the game. So for this next one, we just need the one character. So we're going to choose question to have willpower. So willpower says at the beginning of your turn, roll a d6. On a 5 or 6, so not in this case, let's say the question had 2 tokens and rolls a 5. Willpower is then just going to remove one of those tokens. So instead of having to rest this turn and do nothing, question could then decide to attack or move or do something else in the turn. It's a very useful and strong power. It's something you normally, if you have it as a defense power, it's not great, but if you have it in a special, if you have it as an extra ability, it's very nice. Stuff like Power Cosmic can give you it. There's other ways to get it. There's the Great Size gives you a more powerful version. So there's a few different options with willpower. And it's just an added bonus, honestly. Like I say, if it's your only defense power, then you probably should be worried as it doesn't help you defensively, really. It just helps you remove tokens and keep fighting. Invincible, very easy. Let's say we've got Penetrating Psychic Blast with Constantine and he's going to shoot and he's hit. Question in this case. Question has Invincible, so it reduces damage by 2 but also can't be penetrated. So Constantine only deals 2, so in this case would deal absolutely nothing to the question. Let's say he had 4 damage, question would only take 2 of them. Invincible really is maybe the best. It's the most consistently good defense power anyway. You don't have to roll for it like super senses. You're just reducing a ton of damage and you can't be penetrated, which is nice. Stuff like Invulnerability, Toughness, Impervious can all be penetrated via Exploit Weakness or Penetrating Psychic Blast. So having someone like Invincible, normally on those bigger characters, those bigger point characters, just makes them stand out. It's always the power you want on your top click if you're looking at a more expensive figure, and is 100% one of the most powerful defense powers. The other one we spoke about there is Impervious. So let's say Constantine's going to shoot just a regular attack into the question. Let's say Constantine is hit, so we're going to go to the question. With Impervious, it reduces it by 2. Let's say Constantine's dealing 3 damage, however. So we're going to roll, because you do get to roll a d6 with Impervious. Let's say we roll a 6. In this case, it would reduce the damage taken to 0. So if we rolled a 5-6, it goes down to 0, the damage. If we roll a 1-4, we get to reduce it by 2 still, so we'll just take the 1. So Impervious, if the damage isn't penetrating, can be better than Invincible. However, let's say Constantine was shooting a Penetrating Psychic Blast at question with Impervious. Not only does it ignore the reduce of damage, it also ignores the roll. It just goes through the power entirely. So in this case, if Constantine had 3 damage penetrating, Impervious would be ignored and we take the full 3 damage. So it really does depend what you're being attacked by. Sometimes, and most of the time, Invincible is better because a ton of stuff has penetrating damage in some way. If not, arguably Impervious slightly better as you do get the roll. Okay, Regeneration. Let's say question is on his last click and he's got Regeneration. He's going to decide to use Regen. So in this case, you roll a d6 and you half your result, or you heal half your result rounded up. So if we roll a 1 or a 2, you get to heal 1. If you roll a 3 or a 4, you get to heal 2. And if you roll a 5 or a 6, you get to heal 3. Now, obviously, the higher the better. You're always going to want those higher rolls. There are a few things that change this. So if you roll, let's say you're on a stop click and you roll Regen. A stop click reduces your healing by 1 by support and Regen. So instead of, let's say we rolled a 6, instead of healing that 3, we'll just heal the 2. Still very good. Obviously, it's something you'll probably want to do off a stop click because once you heal above it, you then hit to it again. So it makes you very tanky. A stop click is basically, I'll just talk about that quickly. We will get into that in another video as well, but I'll just touch on it briefly here. So let's say the question had a stop click on click 3. So we're dealt, let's say 6 damage. 1, 2, we hit a stop click, we stop clicking. So it's a way of avoiding a ton of damage. It's a way of making a character very tanky. And again, if we had Regen on our stop click and we rolled a 5, instead of healing 3, we only heal 2, but we go 1, 2, back up to our top click. Now, next time we hit again, that stop click is still active. So let's say we take another 6 the following turn, we end up on that click again. It's not often you see any kind of healing on stop clicks because it is a very, very powerful combination. However, it does take a token to use Regen. So you are not attacking, you're not doing anything else. But if you can keep yourself alive and avoid giving up points, it might be worth it. Finally, we've got one more. So Constantine is just going to shoot the question. The question is having invulnerability in this case. Just reduces damage by 2 simply. So if Constantine hit the question, because he only does 2 damage, it would do absolutely nothing to question. However, again, if it was penetrating psychic blast, exploit weakness, any kind of penetrating damage, it would go through the power. And let's say he's got penetrating 2 damage, we would just take the 2. So in the reducers, toughness is the worst, invulnerability second, then probably impervious, and then invincible. Obviously I did mention impervious and invincible can be interchangeable. The other 2 are just worse versions, but they're nice to have on those lower point characters, gives them some kind of reduction and way to survive as well. That is all we've got for this episode though. That is all the defense powers. Like I say, in the next one, we'll be touching on damage. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below and I will catch you in the next one.